After wishing you a Boker Tov, today's daf is daf Mem Dalid, and we're going to begin with El Dekasha on the top line. Let's keep in mind that we don't take the lulav on Shabbos, and we gave explanations for that in yesterday's daf. And even if Shabbos coincides with the first day of Yontiv, we don't take the lulav. And now the Gemara says, El Akasha Hani Tarte. We have a stira in two Mishnayos. When did they bring the lulav to the Beis Hamikdash? Tanachada, according to one, Kol Ha'molichenes Lulaveim L'Harabayis, that if Shabbos coincides with Sukkot, then everyone would bring their lulav before Shabbos, so as not to violate Shabbos, and leave it in the area, the Itztaba of the Harabayis. Another mission, on the other hand, says, Tanan Idach Lebeis HaKnesses, that the people brought their lulavim on Erev Shabbos to the shul. And how do we reconcile these two? Mitartzinon, we offered the following resolution: Kan Bisman Shebeis Hamikdash Kayim, Kan Bisman She'ein Beis Hamikdash Kayim. That the reason why the second Mishnah mentions Beis HaKnesses because the Churban had already taken place. They couldn't bring it obviously to the Arbayis after the Churban, so they brought it to the shul. But this implies clearly that they took the lulav even on Shabbos. Lo, the Gemara says that's not how you understand those Mishnayos. Idi ve'idi bizman shebeis hamikdash kaim. Both Mishnayos are referring to the period of time when the Mikdash stood. And b'mikdash kan b'gvula. During the time of the Mikdash, they certainly took the lulav on Shabbos. Why does one Mishnah say they took it to the Beis HaKnesses? And the answer is because they were living at a great distance from the Beis HaMikdash. They couldn't manage to bring the lulavim that far of a distance before Shabbos into the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore they brought it to the Beis HaKnesses, which was local, and that's where they took the lulav. So those who are living in close proximity to the Beis Hamikdash, they took their lulavim to the Beis Hamikdash on Erev Shabbos. Those who lived at a distance, they would bring their lulavim to the shul. But both Mishnayos agree that after the Churban, there was no longer a possibility of taking the lulav on Shabbos and overriding the Shabbos by taking the lulav. And as we explained yesterday, the reason for that is because since in Chutz La'aretz, they were not B'kiyim B'kviyat B'Yarchei, they didn't know for sure whether this was actually the 15th of Tishrei and the Chiv Doraisa the first day. And now we want to equalize B'nai Eretz Yisrael with B'nai Chutz La'aretz. It shouldn't be two different minhagim and not violate the Lotus Godedu. So they established that just like the B'nai Chutz La'aretz would not take the lulav on Shabbos, so too the B'nai Eretz Yisrael would not take the lulav on Shabbos. Amalei Abai l'Rav. Abai asked the following question: Maishna lulav davdina le'shiva zeichel le'mikdash, u'maishna arava delavdina le'shiva zeichel le'mikdash. After all, when the Mikdash stood, they took the lulav for 7 days to be Mekayim the mitzvah doraisa of usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokechem shivas yomim, and the same was true of the lulav. They did this kifas lulav and they circled the mizbeach every single day of Sukkot. Now, if today, after the Churban, Rabbi Yochanan and Succah established a takana mishum zeichel hamikdash that we take the lulav not just the first day, but all 7 days, why didn't they make the same takana of Zeichel and Mikdash with regard to the Arava? Amalei, and Rava gave a very strange answer to Abai's question. Hovi Adam Yotzi Dechovaso Be'arava Shebelulav. There was no need for a separate takana of Zeichel and Mikdash with regard to the Arava, because in any event, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of lulav, the Arava was one of the 4 minim. When they took the lulav, they were Mekayim as Zeichel Hamikdash of the Arava. Now, this is a little bit strange because he's assuming, Rava, that there's a Zeichel Hamikdash by taking the Arava in the Daled Minim all 7 days of Succah. I don't know. Where's the Zeichel Migdash? The Arava in the Migdash was taken in and of itself, by itself. Hamalei. So Abai says, what are you telling me? When he takes the lulav with the Daled Minim, that's a kiyum of Zeichel Migdash for the Arava. Hahu mishum lulav udekavidle. The reason why he's taking the lulav for 7 days is Zeichel Migdash for the mitzvahs of smachtem l'fnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yomim, not for the sake of the Arava. And now Abaye tries to defend Rava. Interesting. Abaye attacks Rava, but yet he tries to offer a solution, and he demonstrates that that's not a valid solution. Maybe you'll answer me, Rava. Perhaps we should lift up the Daled Minim, put them down, and take them up a second time. And that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, Abaye's going to say we don't do that, but as if to say we do that in order to fulfill a Zeichel Migdash of the Arava. So the first time we pick up the Daled Minim, that's Zeichel Migdash for Lulav, and then we put it down, we take up the Daled Minim again, and that Lekicha, taking up the Daled Minim a second time, will be a fulfillment of Zeichel Migdash for the Arava. He says, Abai testifies, we never found anyone. I never saw anyone who did such a chumrah, nice chumras, but I never saw anyone who took the lulav, put it down, and picked it up again. And if that be the case, there's no Zeichel Migdash of Arava. You want to tell me that the second time he picks up the lulav, he's Mekayim the Zeichel Migdash of Arava? Nobody picks up the lulav the second time. And here you should know the Sfas Emes has a very interesting diuk. He says, who says that you have to take the lulav, put it down, and pick it up again? Wouldn't shehiyah, meaning holding on to the lulav more than just 1 second, that itself should be a kiyum of Zeichel and Migdash for the Arava? Because as far as the lulav is concerned, the very moment he picked up the lulav, he was already mekayim the mitzvah of lulav. When he holds on to it another extended period of time, no matter how short it is, let it be another minute or two, then he has an achiza, he's holding on to the Arava, and he's mekayim the mitzvah of Zeichel Arava, because the Zeichel lulav, he was mekayim as soon as he picked up the lulav. And the Sfas Emes wants to derive a very far-reaching conclusion from this diuk, and that is that the mitzvah of lulav, and for that matter the mitzvah of Arava as well, requires not just achiza, meaning holding on to it, but it requires lekicha, taking it into your hands. And the Sfas Emes says that has repercussions in a case where he took the Daled Minim into his hands before Alos HaShachar, when it was still Laila. And the question is, now that it's Yom, after daybreak, does he have to put it down and take it up again? And the Sfas Emes wants to conclude from our Gemara that it's not enough that he continues his achiza, holding the lulav, but rather he has to put it down and pick it up again. So now at this point, Rava is going to try to answer the kasha of Abai in a different way. Lulav doraisa avdina shiva zeichel migdash. Rava derabanan lo avdina le shiva zeichel migdash. Rava in this statement assumes that Arava, even in the Mikdash, is only derabanan. Arava derabanan, meaning in Mikdash, is therefore lo avdina le zecher. We don't have to do a zecher to the Mikdash for a mitzvah derabanan in the Mikdash. Wait a second. Can Rava be correct? What is the basis for Rava's premise that the Arava in the Beis HaMikdash is derabanan? Laman, Rava, your premise, can it reconcile with anyone? Elam, if you're going to try to reconcile it with Abba Shol, Abba Shol derives the Arava in Migdash from a pasuk in the Torah. Ha'amar, Abba Shol derives it from Arvei Nachal in the plural. It doesn't say take one willow, it says take two willows. Ksiv Shtayim, Achas lelulav, v'achas lemigdash. One arava is part of the daled minim to fulfill the mitzvah l'kachtem lachem, and there's another arava that's taken separately to fulfill the mitzvah of arava shebemigdash. Rabbanon, the Rabbanon did not accept that drasha. They derive other conclusions from the plural of arvei nachal. For example, that you have to take 2 willows, not enough one stem. Is hilchasa gemiral. The Rabbanon actually agree with Abba Shaul in fundamental principle that Arav and Migdash is Doraisa. They don't derive it from the pasuk Arvei Nachal, but they never said that Arav and the Migdash is Rabbanon. What they said was that Arav and Migdash is Halach Moshe Sinai. So it has the status of a Doraisa, and therefore we're back to square one. Our original kasha, to the same extent that we take lulav for 7 days as a Zecher LeMigdash, we should certainly be taking our Rava 7 days as a Zecher LeMigdash. And we don't have the answer that we put down the lulav and picked it up again. We never saw such a thing. Yomar Avasi Yom Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Nechunya Ish Bikas Beis Chorsin Eser Netios Arava V'Nisach Hamayim Alocha L'Moshe Misinai. Now, Eser Netios is halacha with regard to Shemitah. And this halacha of Tosefet Shemitah during the 30-day period starting with Rosh Chodesh Elul, which would have been about 2 weeks ago. And you're not allowed to plow your field during Tosefet Shemitah. However, if you have a densely populated area, meaning densely populated by netios, by saplings, within an area of 2,500 amma, so 10 saplings, we really have a problem here because these are young trees, they're saplings, netios, and they'll perish because they're fighting over the same nutrients. And therefore, the Halacha Moshe Sinai says that with regard to netios, if they're within a very small, a relatively small area, Beis Osayim, then we allow you to do whatever's necessary in the field in order to protect the netios so they don't wilt away. Then we have Nisach HaMayim. Every day of Sukkot, they went out Ushavta Mayim B'Simcha to the Mei HaShiloach in order to pour the Mayim on the Mizbeach. And that's also Halacha Mishinai. Last but not least, we have Harava. So we see it's Doraisa. Elo Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei the Rava Lulav the Islay Ikar Min Torah B'Gvulin Avdina Le Shiva Zeich LeMigdash. Harava the Leslay Ikar Min Torah B'Gvulin Lo Avdina Shiva Zeich LeMigdash. This mitzvah in the Migdash of Harava to circle the Mizbeach has no parallel whatsoever outside the confines of the Migdash. And that's not so in the case of Lulav. There's a mitzvah of Lulav in Migdash all 7 days, but there is, at least on the first day of Sukkot, a parallel mitzvah side by side to the Lulav in Migdash outside the Migdash. And that upgrades the status of Lulav, because now Lulav is a mitzvah that overlaps Migdash and Gvulin. In contrast, Arava is exclusively a Migdash mitzvah. When we do a Zecher for the Ikar mitzvah, the primary mitzvah, which is a mitzvah that, as we said before, overlaps between Beis HaMikdash and Gvulin, and that's Lulav, not Arava. So Arava is not on the same level as Lulav, insofar as Arava has no Ikar at all in Gvulin, as opposed to Lulav, which has an Ikar in Gvulin. Now, we had mentioned before Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Nechunya with regard to Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, in which he listed 3 cases of mitzvos that are derived from Halacha L'Moshe Sinai. Amar Reish Lakish, Kohanim Bali Mumim Nichnasim Bein Ha'ulam Lemizbeach Kidei Lotzeis Ba'arav. Normally, a Balmum, a Kohen Balmum, who has a permanent blemish in his body, although he's allowed to enter the Azara, but he can't go too far to the west, meaning towards the Mikdash itself. And the area that he's precluded from is called Bein Ha'ulam Lemizbeach. In other words, where the Mizbeach ended, then there's an area that takes you to the Ulam, which is the entry chamber into the Heichal. However, they had a leniency, a dispensation for a Kohen Balmum in order to participate with the mitzvah of Arav. And if need be, he would actually enter into that area, Bein Ulam L'Mizbeach, which is normally Asur, but they were matter it for the sake of the Arava. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan, Mi Amra, who said such a thing? Mi Amra, you Amra. You yourself, Rabbi Yochanan, said it. The Amar of Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Chunyim Ish Bekas Beis Karsu, Eser Netios, Arava, B'nisach HaMayim Aloch LeMoshe B'Sinai. So we see that Rabbi Yochanan himself said, and we have it on record, that the status of Arava in Mikdash is a mitzvah doraisa. So what do you mean, Mi Amra? You know, the assumption was that Mi Amra means, could Reish Lakish be correct that there's a mitzvah of Arava such that it would override the Isser of a Balmum going, Mizbeach into that area near the Ulah? Ella Mi Amora Binetila, Dilma bin Ezekifa, where Rabbi Yochanan was asking Reish Lakish, apparently your assumption is that there's a mitzvah of circling the Mizbeach with the Arav. And that makes it into a kiyum on the Gavra, the person of the Kohen. And you could say, therefore, in order for the Kohen to fulfill that mitzvah, if he's a Baal Mum, we're going to be more lenient in terms of where he's allowed to enter for the sake of that mitzvah, because it's a mitzvah netila, and the Kohen is now fulfilling that mitzvah, even though he's a Baal Mum. However, says Rabbi Yochanan, who revealed to you that secret, that the mitzvah Arava is a mitzvah of netila? Maybe it's a mitzvah Zakifa. And if it's a mitzvah Zakifa, we don't need the Baal Mum to get involved in this. We just have to make sure that the heft of the Mizbeach is given this beautiful adornment of the Arav. So any Kohen can come forward. There's no pressing need to introduce a Baal Mum. If there's a mitzvah netila, then we don't want to deny the Baal Mum that kiyum mitzvah that he could obtain by doing the netila of the Arava. So we'll let him come into that area. But if there's no mitzvah on the Kohen, and it just the job has to get done, and any Kohen, one single Kohen even, could come forward and adorn the Mizbeach with the Kifas Arava, then why should we be matir a Baal Mum to do so? Mi Amara b'Balei Mumin. Okay, the Arava has to be taken and carried to the Mizbeach, correct? But it's only a mitzvah of Zakifa. So why do we need Kohanim, and in this case a Baal Mum dafka, to fulfill this mitzvah of Zakifas Mizbeach? There's no need to override the Isur of Baal Mum to enter into this area, which normally he would be excluded from. Why not perform this mitzvah of Zakifas HaMizbeach with Tmimim, with Kohanim who are not blemished? and therefore there's no reason to be matir it. Itmar, Rabbi Yochanan ben Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Chad Omar Arava Yisod Nevi'im, v'Chad Omar Arava Minag Nevi'im. We have a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Right now, we don't know who holds what. The Gemara is going to clarify that immediately. One opinion is that the Arava is a Yisod. Yisod means it's not just a minhag, but it's a real chiyuv. The Gemara later on is going to question how could that be possible that the Nevi'im would have established a chiyuv and a mitzvah of Arava. That makes no sense. We have a principle called Ein Novi Rashoy L'Chadish Davar. Another opinion is that the Nevi'im established a minhag, but only a custom. And then Nafkamina will be a brach. We don't make a brach on a minhag, we make a brach on a chiyuv, even if it's a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. So if you hold Yisod Nevi'im, there'll be a bracha. Tis time to Rabbi Yochanan, hu di'omar Yisod Nevi'im. We're going to prove that it's Rabbi Yochanan indeed who was of the opinion that the Nevi'im established a real bona fide chiyuv of Arava. The Omer Rabbi Avo, Omer Rabbi Yochanan Arava Yisod Nevi'im. So we see clearly that Rabbi Yochanan went on record as maintaining that Arava is a chiyuv to stayim, and that's how we're going to leave it. It's a clear-cut proof. Amalei Rabbi Zera Rabbi Avo, mi Omer Rabbi Yochanan hachi. Is it really possible that the institution and the obligation of Arava, whether it means circling the Mizbeach or just adorning the Mizbeach with a skifa, and all that it was instituted by the Nevi'im? We have this statement of Rabbi Yochanan, the name of Rabbi Nechunya Ish Bekas Beis Chorzin, that there are three mitzvos that are halacha l'Moshe Sinai. One is Eser Netios, the other is Arava, and the third was Nisach HaMayim. They're all halacha l'Moshe Sinai. You can't tell me they were established by the Nevi'im. Ishtomem kishachad. And at this point, Rabbi Avo didn't know what to answer. He took a little bit of time to think, how could he answer this question? Omar, shechachum v'chazu v'yisadum. It wasn't that the Nevi'im established this chiyuv. The Nevi'im don't have the authority to establish the chiyuv, but rather, this chiyuv goes back to the time of Moshe Sinai. But over the course of time, especially during the exile in Bavel, halachas were forgotten. The learning in Bavel was not up to par, as we would say. And therefore, we needed the Nevi'im to establish this chiyuv because it went into oblivion. It was forgotten. Gemara says, no. You're attributing to Rabbi Yochanan an attitude towards Bavel, an attitude of suspicion that the Babylonians, Ki'ilu, forgot their Torah. Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi, v'Amar Rabbi Yochanan tilchun amri bilahonhi. Now this has to do with Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbi Yochanan found Rav Kahana to be an outstanding Talmid Chacham. Rabbi Yochanan was in shock that the Torah in Bavel was on such a high level, and he exclaimed, after he came in contact with Rav Kahana and his Torah, that the first Torah is yours, Dilchon Amri, Dilahoni. That Torah that's yours here in Eretz Yisrael, that's what he says to his local Talmidim, is his as well, meaning referring to the Talmidei Chachamim like Rav Kahana that came from Bavel. They also are great scholars. They have not forgotten their Torah. They retained everything that they studied, and I see it from Rav Kahana. So if that be the case, how can you tell me that Rabbi Yochanan suspected the Babylonians to have forgotten their Torah? And therefore, we now go back to another question. And that is, how could Rabbi Yochanan have stated that Arava is Yesod HaNevi'im? That's impossible. Rabbi Yochanan himself goes on record as saying that Arava is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Can it have been established by the Nevi'im